Now, as the AV landscape becomes increasingly interconnected, the spectre of cybersecurity the threat looms larger than ever, is what I'm trying to say. Let's demystify the complexities in cybersecurity and share knowledge to protect AV systems this afternoon. Your moderator for this important session, cybersecurity specialist at Cisco, Bradley Ansis.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking some of your time today to spend it with us to talk about this, well, to me, is certainly a very important topic. Thank you in particular to Dean, Graham, Ashana, Steve and Zach for agreeing to be on the panel. As I've already introduced, I'm not an AV expert. I'm just one of those really annoying users that come and ask you stupid questions about, how to turn it on, etc. But I've been around IT and cybersecurity for over 20 years and I've seen a lot. I've seen, casinos being compromised via a temperature sensor in a fish tank. Obviously, we saw Target get compromised by through an HVAC controller. I look at AV from a cybersecurity viewpoint, and I look at it with suspicion. And I look at it with suspicion because I don't know that much about the infrastructure. So, I think there's a real opportunity for us to make sure that we're educating both sides of the fence. And why should there be a fence? We need to get that out of the way as well. So I think that's a critical part of how we move forward. With that, I'd like to ask, so I think today we really want to talk about two key points, why we need to secure AV, now that it's so IT-centric, and how we go about it. And thank you, Steve, for that line. I like that one a lot. I've got another one of yours I'm going to reuse and steal and call my own later. With that, I'd like to ask each panel member to introduce themselves and maybe provide some initial thoughts on exactly why and how.
G'day all, I'm Dean McFadden, been everything from a consultant to an annoyance to vendors, worked for end users, large university and that sort of stuff. I've been pretty involved in the convergence of AV, I've been very passionate about that for a long time. Probably about the cyber issue, obviously cyber attacks are a lot more prevalent, we see them in the media every day. AV is an IT domain, whether we believe it or not. There's a lot of people, unfortunately, don't think we are, but we definitely are. We're a lot more connected. We're consuming a lot more services on the network, be it bandwidth, ports, and definitely data center services. We're exposed externally with conferencing is just a must-have in every room, especially post-COVID. So we're a lot more connected. We're a lot more visible. We're definitely a target, and we're probably a lot less mature than a lot of the other disciplines. So we're probably seen as a soft target. So it's definitely, I think, a priority that we as an industry address that. And it's not only the manufacturers, which were well represented here on the board, consultants like myself and integrators, it's end users, anyone involved in the industry really needs to be sort of active in this space.
Thank you.
Graham Barrett with Harman. I've been with AMX specifically, and now Harman for nearly 40 years, predominantly in solutions and support roles, also leadership and management in various different organisations. Been with the manufacturer in Harman now for 5 years. I guess specifically as it relates to AMX, we are very strong in the defence vertical and secure agencies vertical. And a lot of what we have done in the security environment and a lot of the challenge that we see is actually being driven by those customers. So a lot of the work that we've done and I've done has actually been triggered, I guess, in reverse to traditional AV where security is a secondary concern. For defence and secure agencies, security is the first concern. So working in that space, you very quickly get to understand how critical that is to those customers. So the what in that environment is very much, it must be secure. And the how is really comes down to, how you design a system to reduce, threat vectors, how you design hardware to allow traditional AV and a networked AV solution to be deliverable, but provide a form of isolation between that and and I guess the in this case the defence network. So certainly keen to contribute to the panel and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Graham. Shana.
Oshana Jana, Access Communications. My background is more telecommunications before joining Access. but I've been working for Access for 10 years. So my contribution will be on the manufacturer side of the discussion. As we see the IT and AV becoming converged or the boundaries blurring, there's a massive responsibility on the manufacturer to make sure that our devices and our solutions comply with the IT requirements. So my focus will be on what are the built-in cybersecurity feature that we look at, designing in our product to make them more cyber secure and more accepted by the IT market. And we always talk about cybersecurity as it's not a feature, it's not a button that you can turn on. It's a number of, it involves people, processes, and as well as you have to have those built-in cybersecurity features to be able to make your devices and solutions more accepted by the IT market. And we also have a journey that I can share with Access Communications. We introduced the first IP camera in the world in 1996. It's more on the CCTV side and on security side, but that journey involved converting the analog world into IP world, and the beginning is not easy. So it has to be accepted in the industry, and to make it accepted, it has to comply with the IT requirements. If it doesn't, transparency is a key in cybersecurity.
Thank you, Shana. Steve.
Hey, I'm Steve Miles. I'm with ProAV Solutions. So I've been an integrator primarily for most of my career, but I remember about probably 10 years, maybe longer, 15 ago, we started putting devices on networks, things like trying to monitor devices and that sort of thing. So as you're building an AV system, traditionally we just put in maybe a network switch if we needed it to connect a touch panel or a controller or whatever else. But as we've sort of moved more and more IT-centric, we started getting asked these questions about, what ports do you want open? And as an AV person, I was like, I don't know what you mean by what ports, right? So as we move into networked control, networked AV monitoring, suddenly we started to need to upskill our integrators, our installers, our programmers, our commissioners, so that we could actually meet the requirements and understand the questions that were being asked by networks teams. We just need some internet access. Oh yeah, what port, what sort of protocols are you running? Is that secure? Like, I don't know. So there was a big need at that point to really start upskilling. And the last 10 years have been extremely interesting as we see more and more networked AV, team systems and all of that we're starting to integrate with customers' IT networks.
Excellent. Zach.
Hello, my name is Zach Snook. I'm with Biamp. I'm the Director of Product Management there. I've been with Biamp for 16 years now. I started in the app side, so I had a lot of the boots on the ground side on our deployments. It's interesting hearing everybody talk about this. I like some of the comments that you guys made of kind of the beginning, even though it's been 10 years, right? But I was thinking before this panel a little bit of, how has the AV market kind of grown and where are we at? And it's been interesting to me. We've really kind of lived in isolation on the network. Like we were allowed to be there, but we were segregated, right? We weren't trusted. But we kept pushing because there were so many advantages to getting more and more on the network. And I think, with like cloud-based technology and monitoring now and IoT stuff, it's become more and more apparent that AV is needed to be on that network. So, we've grown up over the last 10 years as an industry, but we're really kind of grabbing fourth gear now, I guess, and really having to think about this a lot more and concern ourselves with the security side to play in that IT space and to get the advantages of it. We need to step up to the plate a bit. So,
awesome. All right. Well, thank you for those initial comments. Cisco's a cybersecurity vendor as well as a lot of different things. So, if you ask any or talk to or spend any time with a typical cybersecurity vendor, we're always going to tell you that the world's about to stop spinning. It's absolutely, the latest thing happening, it's all bad news, and get you completely depressed to try and unlock your wallet to spend more money on some security product or widget that we're trying to sort of bag, right? But I guess what I'm interested to understand is what is actually the truth behind this from an AV viewpoint? I mean, what do you see as the current drivers for the cybersecurity controls that you're sort of building into your products? And I'll throw this open to anyone on the panel.
I think one of the misconceptions is that AV is not a piece of compute connected to a network. Historically, AV was, a video switcher or whatever, and effectively a relatively dumb device. Any piece of equipment, be it a camera, be it a controller, be it a DSP these days, is potentially a very powerful processor running some form of code sitting on a network. Most, if not all, of those hacks that you talked about were leveraged through an actor accessing that appliance and that code on the network and using that access in nefarious ways. So I think the change is that AV hardware is now become much more powerful. It is fundamentally compute sitting on a network, and therefore it is potentially as vulnerable as all of those devices, like the air conditioning controller in Target. There was a recent hack up at QUT, which was actually photocopier controllers. All of these things, the threat vector is actually the appliance sitting on the network that, through poor security of that device or incorrect configuration of that device, exposes a threat vector that someone's exploited. So I think that's the biggest change, and that's I think that was your question, as to why that's now become such a critical part of what we all have to consider.
Perfect. Any other examples? Any other drivers for cybersecurity? I mean, we've got 3 different manufacturers on the panel here. I mean, why are you building cybersecurity into your products? I mean, you're a director of product management, so I'm going to pick on you straight away.
All right, that's fine.
I used to be a product manager as well, so it's about time I got my own back. Exactly. So, I mean, how do you prioritize those features over maybe some other whiz-bang fancy new capability for the actual users? I mean, how do you prioritize security?
Well, it's easy because customers demand it, right? So we have to prioritize that in order to be successful in selling products. So I think in the past, maybe it's a little lax. They view as in general, we were kind of adapting standards that IT did, but we just kind of put them in Telnet's a good example, right? Like, oh, well, I support Telnet. And we were very slow to change that. Like, that's a very unsecure and a very poor way of doing things. And, we've adapted over the years of supporting SSH in that case or something different. We started placing media on networks and it was unencrypted. Now it's changed to that. So we've adapted to doing that. But I think now the shift has been customers' demand, and we are being asked to utilize networks more, and we need to make sure that we follow the rules. And really, I think from a manufacturer standpoint, we aren't necessarily defining those rules. We have to figure out what those protocols, what the standards are, and start deploying them correctly and doing it more proactively, not reactively. So from a BIAMP's perspective, when we develop products, we will write into the specifications or the user needs of that product requirements document security mechanisms. In fact, we have templates that we put in just to say it must do this. It's on every document we put through. It's a part of every project that we think about, and it's implemented in every product that we create. So we keep it on the forefront and never let it forget, and make sure that every project is aware of it.
Great answer. Do you want to make a comment, Steve?
Yeah, I think the similar sort of thing from an integrator perspective. You go, BIAM supports Telnet, and that's right, but you can turn it off. From an integrator, you need to recognize that needs to happen, and you need to change the default password from admin or admin password, right? That how many AV devices can you still just get into from another integrator because it's admin or 1988 or right? Everybody knows the code.
That's a secret.
Even I knew that one. Yeah.
Everybody knows.
I was
it.
going for the 1988.
That's a secret. You can't tell everyone
We
that.
know it. And even I came from a different manufacturer and needed to adjust, a different integrator needed to adjust something. I know what their default passwords are. So we need to educate our people and go, stop using default passwords. I was talking with Vitec, for example, and they said this box and it sits on the network and it's fantastic. It does all this. First time you log into it, you have to change the password. And I'm like, it's just like a mature PC, Oh, I've just got a new username. I need to change my password. So they won't let you violate the security that they've built into their product.
That's actually a requirement in Europe now. And any new product launched in Europe must have first-time password reset.
Yeah.
They probably should go further than that. I mean, we're definitely seeing the manufacturers incorporate a lot more security. And I did a bit of research for coming year. I thought I'd better check my facts that are in my head with reality and Googled what security documents the number of manufacturers had. And it varied from stick it on a separate network, which was one I won't name, through to people publishing quite extensive white papers and bits and pieces. They all talk about 802.1x and certificates and encryption. Some of the encryption stuff is actually opt-in. Dante is still not encrypted, although they just released a media release on June that they'll encrypt the AV stream now.
We're actually working with them on that.
Yeah. So it's definitely happening, but the gap is, and as Steve sort of alluded to, I don't think it's getting to us in that even with passwords. I mean, there's tools in the IT world, we got AD and all that to manage that sort of, identity management and all that. We as AV people aren't aware of that unless you've been introduced to it somewhere. And during my role in university, I was lucky I was exposed to a lot of this stuff, and that's where I got my background in it, enough to ask the questions. But I think generally that information's not getting out there to the normal people just working in either smaller establishments, smaller universities, smaller enterprises, that sort of stuff. Even smaller consultancies, larger consultancies may not be aware of some of the aspects. So I'm kind of seeing that gap.
Yeah. And what IT has done forever with privilege identity management and all of the different Azure AD and authentication and all of that, we can do that on a lot of vendors' hardware, but as AV integrators, we barely understand it. So we're just starting to touch it, which is fantastic, but we really need to
And we
step up
tend
our
to
game.
use a lot of the different manufacturers' boxes to build a system.
Yep.
Then it means
can Google
multiple
it.
systems to manage those if they exist and can extend past layer 2.
I think another great example in this area actually is, you're talking about passwords. So, we're now going passwordless, whatever that means. But, we certainly, your users don't necessarily need a password anymore. They need an authentication method to get in. How is that going to work on AV devices? So, you've kind of got up with changing default passwords. That's where we were 10 years ago. I'm not trying to be
No,
smart.
it's
but-
a great example. It's a fantastic example. AV's going, wait, what? What's a password? And this is, one of the real challenges is, I think, the gulf between, if you like, corporate and non-secure AV and secure AV. Because I can tell you, in secure AV, there is very, very clear documents on how you configure a system to ensure it's, in the US, it's called a MUD guide, a military unique deployment guide. And that tells you exactly, if you have a JITC certification, how that piece of hardware or that system must be configured. Now, that's a really interesting document. It actually tells you how to turn a very insecure system, unsecure, whatever the correct terminology is, into an incredibly secure system. But I guarantee you, very, very few people.
I think it's unsecure. It doesn't require counselling. That'd be insecure, wouldn't it?
Yes. No, I am insecure, and that is, again, a slightly different concept. So I think that gulf between defence AV and the requirements within, and I say defence, secure agencies, they're really all lumped into one. Certainly if you look at some of the stuff that Steve and I have been doing together. So in a lot of cases, there is the ability to lock down the AV equipment to become very, very secure, but there's not enough understanding on that by, as you say, the average consultant or the average integrator, if you're not working in those spaces.
And defence go to a lot of effort to segregate networks. You'll sit at a desktop and there'll be 3 different sockets that you can plug your computer
A blue
into.
one, a pink one.
Yeah. So there's a lot of other systems in place. On a standard enterprise network, there's just not the budget or the capacity to go to that level.
And you talked about documentation a little bit too. That's part of the standards, right? It's a way to check and make sure that you are in a compliant state is you have that documentation, you have a plan in place for when things go wrong or, when there's a new attack out and then how are you handling that? So that's things to look at, I guess, as an integrator from manufacturers and other things is there a plan in place even before something happens?
Maybe I can add more from the manufacturer side. When we're talking about cybersecurity, it's always a balance. Accessibility versus cybersecurity. So the more secure you make it, the less accessible it becomes. So it's always reaching that balance. But it's from the manufacturer perspective, how can we make the devices secure by default? So when we're shipping something, we want to make it as easy as possible for our integrators, for our end users to implement cyber secure networks with minimum amount of effort. So we actually work on tools that can manage, the device throughout its life cycle. So I can have a device that is secure today, but in 2 years' time, it doesn't mean it's secure. How can I apply, cybersecurity patches to the current firmware in an efficient way? If I have to log into every device and do firmware upgrades, then that's not practical, and no one will maintain a cyber secure network. So if I ship cameras that force you to enter passwords that are not the default passwords, then we are one step closer So cybersecurity is, again, it's not just one feature that you can turn on. It's actually a number of implementations that you can add. The more you add, the less accessible it becomes, but the more cybersecure it becomes. So how can I secure my devices and make it possible for the IT department to maintain it over time as well? We always say the device has two lives. One of them is, when you the operational side of the device, but is it cyber secure after 5-6 years? Is the manufacturer maintaining the firmware and providing current patches and transparent in actually saying that there is a vulnerability in the device, and how it's communicated to the customers as well? It's very important.
I think I think you made a really interesting point between accessibility and usability when you first fire the device on, and security. So from a security viewpoint, a very interesting concept and great way to think about cybersecurity is the concepts behind zero trust. So basically, even if you plug in, doesn't mean you're allowed on my network, and I'm going to shut down everything until I understand exactly where you need to go and only send you to those places. So how does that apply to how you would ship a product? Obviously, ideally from a manufacturer's viewpoint, you'd plug it in and then as many features as possible, all the ones that are in your brochure, all start lighting up and are all usable. But, is that really the right way to ship a product? I'm really interested in your thoughts.
I think there's a couple of answers there. One, it's important to understand that not every user requires a very highly secure platform or a very highly secure product. So within the Harman range, for example, we have everything from a $40 loudspeaker through to the most complicated bit of control equipment in the world. And there are certainly products that we manufacture, bring to market at a price point which do not have the levels of security which our corporate or government customers would require. But they're very, very simple to install, very simple to deploy, very simple to manage. If Defence were to come to me and say, hey, I want to use one of these in our systems, I would say, no, you can't do that because it doesn't support the level of security that you require. So I think it's important to understand that there is definitely a market and a requirement for those very accessible products, for those very simple products that don't have the burden of cost for an extremely highly secure product. Also, there are then levels of security that are required. And if we think of Defence as being the most secure and then come down from that, there's many SMEs which require a level of cybersecurity, but not that highly complex, but obviously also more than none. So the challenge is building a product which has the features and the capability that can go all the way up to those very high levels, but to your point, making that easy to deploy and easy to install and easy to understand. And I think as a sweeping generalization, the AV industry does that very poorly because, to Steve's point, the AV industry really doesn't understand it. We're told you must have 8021X. Okay.
Who deploys it?
Who defines how you configure it? You must have, you must only use SSH. Okay. Sure. But a lot of, speaking bluntly, a lot of manufacturers simply put stuff in their boxes because someone has told them that they have to. They don't put it in there with a real understanding of what they're trying to achieve. And I think that this is one of the challenges we face is we're all putting the security features in there because our customers tell us that we should, but what we're not doing is then educating our consultant and our integrator community around here is how you take our box and leverage all this capability to make it highly secure. To your point, there's a lot of stuff that you simply have to be able to say, here is, in some industry, here's our FIPS 140-3 certificate. You must have that if you want to get GDX certification, as an example. We don't have to tell you how we use that inside our box. Slight flaw, if you ask me. So there is this gulf between manufacturers bunging stuff into a box and then ensuring that end result is secure. And that is definitely a challenge that the AV industry is going through because, as a sweeping generalization, we don't understand it.
And even, to your point, 802.1x, you deploy your certificate, you add it to an endpoint device. That actually doesn't secure the device. All it does is secure the network traffic between but you have to understand that as an AV integrator. 802.1x doesn't make my touch panel any more secure. So, understanding these things that IT people are talking about and using, we actually have to fully understand it so we can incorporate it into our AV systems.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of other fundamental things that we as an AV group miss. Like in security, they'll do a risk assessment or they'll have a security plan where they'll evaluate. And as Graham has said, they can go through the risk assessment for a particular application and go, oh, we don't need security here. It's like totally isolated, segregated, whatever. We can get away with whatever. But you've got to be in a position you can identify that we do need security, a certain level of security for different applications. And that varies between user and use case within user. So it's quite a fluid piece. But it's something IT do. And it's, these are the discussions that we have to have with them to enlighten them that what we're doing. So, because quite often they're not aware, because we have come a long way from it was just control traffic, squirting the odd TCP packet out there to turn a projector on. Wasn't anything to what we do now is just chalk and cheese. So I think there's a lot of discussions. It's like, we're not the IT experts, we're not cyber experts, but we generally work with these people and have that dialogue with them so that you can bring them on board to the journey. Like the days of integrators walking in, and when I was at RMIT, shouldn't mention names of university, but they were all the same. It's like, there you go. We had guys configuring switches that weren't even part of the IT team. It's like that wouldn't happen now, and which is a good thing. But we sort of need to go to that next stage where we're starting to get a bigger picture on. Like there is basic sort of like port security, encryption of data, and whether it's at rest or in motion, those sort of things need to be considered. I don't think at rest really appeals to us, but definitely in motion. Privacy is another issue. If you've got a meeting room and if it's a teaching space and we're teaching stuff, that's really public domain. It's unclassified. But if I'm in a meeting room and I'm counselling someone or I'm doing financials, we need to protect that as content as well. So that's sort of a different, even though it's still securing the content, and it all becomes down to that sort of application, risk.
I think you'd mentioned like turning all the features and bells and whistles, and I think the responsible thing that manufacturers should do, and certainly what Biamp does, is to not turn it all on. In fact, you mentioned Telnet. We do have Telnet off by default. I want to clarify that. It's not on. There's even our network setups. We have devices with multiple network ports, and we default them to the most constrained mode and the most isolated mode, and make the process of opening that a decision point, right? It's not coming to you that way. But you made a very good point too. It's a reliance. We can't enforce those rules. We can educate, as you point out, Graham. But Steve was saying that the integrators, the people deploying these things, really have to step up and be a responsible tool. We can give you the tools, but you have to use them
and know what they are.
Yes,
there's
exactly.
a checkbox that says TLS, and you're like, well, I don't know what TLS is. I won't check it. But
Look, I personally blame the consultant. I think this is a great example where consultants can add real value in actually evaluating a system, determining, okay, what are the threat vectors for that system, understanding what the various hardware components look like, and then designing the system around, security boundaries. So, for example, within defence, every AV system has a security boundary. Everything on that side is the defence world. Everything on this side is AV world. Okay, and I'm talking about networks.
Network, not give that a colour too.
They do indeed. So, for example, in the Australian Department of Defence, an AMX system is a security boundary for AV, as one example. And that means that everything on this side is effectively protected from the net, or the network is protected from those devices, depending on how you can look at it, by the security within that piece of hardware. So that piece of hardware has been vetted as being a security boundary. Now, the reality is that that's an example of a well-designed secure system that, frankly, is often not a consideration by a consultant. So I think there's a great opportunity for AV consultants to leverage external, sometimes, security services, potentially from people like Cisco and others, to actually, on the third page of the thing, after the bill of materials and the block diagram, here is actually the secure deployment guide. And then do as you do, okay, yes, you've got the SPL levels and the RTI correct. Let's have a look at your security config. Have you actually removed the default password?
That's actually something I've looked at and failed dismally at. Because when I ask the question of the users, they kind of look at you blankly. When we worked on the Convergence AV project at RMIT, we sent SVSI a security checklist. Please answer a list. and they sort of come back and said, we don't know how to answer it. Yeah, it was very early days. I was involved in a project just recently, a very similar checklist went out, and all vendors answered it because it's a lot more common. But yeah, I can ask the question, but I don't get the answers either. So they kind of
So it's my
falls
fault
onto
still.
these guys
Thanks.
that are on the
No,
site that have got it.
Sorry, it's
fine.
not consultant, it's integrating. It's
Yeah, we
integrator's fault.
tried.
Yeah.
But the only place I ever had a chance to document was I've documented the standards for a number of universities, and in there we will say, close 480, close 23, yeah,
But-
look at this, look at that, and then trying to find naming conventions and stuff so we can at least get some sort of structure to it. But that's in an organisation that has a dialogue with their IT people. So it's a very, you're right, it does fall to us to document it. But we struggle in that as well. And then even if we do document it, there's no guarantee that it actually gets implemented further down the track.
And that was sort of my next point, is that how do you know that I did the thing that you said? So you've got these layers of security that AMX have had around the two different segregated networks. The endpoint can actually be on this network or that network, right? So this little black box sitting behind a display actually has access to a network that it shouldn't have, because one of the commands that I sent in was this one, which maybe was not clearly documented or outlined. And who's going to go plug a laptop in and say, what can I hit from here? But
Well, defence do.
well, yes,
But again, they,
more
they
often
are,
than not,
they
but
are the
not always.
exception no, not always.
Yeah.
They're the exception rather than the rule, to your point.
Yeah.
Those penetration testing, I mean, obviously one lesson you need to learn from that is, they can only assess for what they know. And, the attackers are normally better financed and probably more experienced than, what they're doing.
Well, they
what I
write
did
half the
want to,
tools, don't they?
yeah, exactly. Well, that's where they penetration tests to get
Yeah,
the tools
correct.
from. But one thing I did want to pick up on is, you've all talked about standards. Zach, you talked about rules. Where should we, who should be setting these rules about the security controls and things that we have inside our products? I mean, obviously here in Australia, we've got the Essential 8 by, DSD, for example. We've got the ISM security manual if you want to stay with government, and then you get IRAP certification and, all those sorts of things. We've got ISO 27001, and thank you to the audience for this question, because it's completely in line with what I was about to ask. Where do you look for those rules? How do you know what to apply and what priorities behind those to apply? Because you can't necessarily do them all at once.
Next question. That is
Maybe
part
I
of the
can-
problem.
I can add to this. It depends on the market. For example, we have product and solutions that are for the US markets. You need to be FIPS certified, and you need to have a TPM module as well, which is a safe vault inside your product to make sure that your certificates, your passwords are all safely guarded. But other areas of the world, they allow secure element to be used, which is a lighter weight, even lower cost for us to implement. But if we want to sell product for US and it's for the US market, then TPM module and FIPS certification is a must. In saying that, some of the secure elements are now becoming FIPS certified as well. So it all depends on your market and where you're selling them. But I wanted to go back just to talk about you can have all the features that you want in the product, but if you don't educate the market, the end users, and work with the consultants, and if they don't know how to implement them, you will end up with the situation where you send the questions and you don't get the answer. So complying to this, there are situations where it's a matter of if you don't comply with the standard, you could be penalized as well. So there are things that will keep your network safe, and it's nice to have, but there are things that you actually have to comply with. It's not an option, especially if you are in critical infrastructure and if you are in defense, you actually don't have the choice but to implement all the cybersecurity requirements.
So a lot of comments obviously being around, using defence as best practice, which, obviously is very relevant. But perhaps a question particularly for Dean and Steve, but obviously others don't hold back as you haven't been. But if you're talking to a new customer, maybe not a university, maybe, who knows what they are, right? New customer, and they're sort of looking at all these controls and all these requirements, and you're saying, well, you need to have all these compliance things. But how do you work out actually how serious they need to be about security? Like, what does it really mean to them?
It's a very good question, and one we've probably bumped into all the time. I keep on getting our salespeople saying, hey, I received this document, can you fill it all in? And it's the same group of questions in a different color. Like, it's just, how are you doing this and that? So what's happened more now is their IT people have gone, this is on my network, therefore you must comply with all of the same things that a Cisco switch and a server does and all of that. And some of them are absolutely not relevant. They don't apply to what we're doing or how we're using the systems, that sort of thing. So it ends up being a conversation with the end user going, okay, you've asked me to do this. That's actually not possible or has nothing to do with, I'm not running up a server. I'm not doing whatever else. So you do have to keep assessing it on a case-by-case basis. But once you establish a baseline that you can present to other people and go, hey, here's our baseline. Does that answer all of your questions? Let's talk about the bits where we differ. But I think more and more because customers are aware of it, their ICT departments are getting involved and putting the pressure on us to make sure we comply with those things.
That's an interesting thing you just said, the end user and the AV component, because you're getting that, I'm assuming, because we get those same things and this for the same reasons, like, well, this doesn't even apply to us. But there's a component in the end user that is the AV side and the IT side, and there's an education opportunity for that. The AV person at the end user thing is just passing it along. Like, I don't know what any of this means. And it's apparent that there's a problem there too, right? Like there's a whole group of individuals that are just at the site that need help, that need your help, our help.
I think it's also a factor of responsibility. I think we can all say, well, I don't know what this means, so I'm going to pass it along. When, not if, a major breach happens through a piece of AV equipment, every person who's just passed that along is going to be scrutinised.
Yep.
And I use scrutinised in a very loose term. I mean, beaten senseless. The reality is that it's not happened to us yet, so we're all a bit complacent. And so we do just shrug our shoulders and dramatising for effect. Certainly to take a recent example of QUT and the hack through the photocopying system, without naming the brand of that photocopier, that brand is no longer in use at QUT. And all the people who failed in their duty to secure that system, I suspect, are no longer employed by QUT or by that photocopier company. So it's not happened to us. We haven't seen, the CEO of, choose a company that's not represented on the stage, having to explain how their system created or presented a threat vector that was leveraged by an actor. It will come, and we are all responsible in our component of that supply chain to ensure that the end result is what's achieved. And to, I think, everyone's point, a lot of us are putting a lot of work into making that capability possible. But as an industry, we're not ensuring the outcome. We're not leveraging the tools to deliver the outcome. And I think this is where we really need to learn from the IT industry, because, the reality is if you're XYZ corporate and you're putting in a Cisco switch, they will have, here's how you configure the switch for our environment. Here's our security environment. This is how it's done. It doesn't happen in AV. And again, I blame the consultant.
One other point to add to that, I actually got an email from our CEO probably a couple of days ago talking about our control systems and saying, hey, what sort of cybersecurity insurance do we need in case the code that we've written onto our control systems violates something or other and there's a breach as a result of our control? As we've badly written the code or we've badly implemented some layer of security. So these questions,
you've written a backdoor into your code, because
I haven't.
I know, but
it's not 1988.
Hypothetically.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And so the more transparent we can be with that, the better. But these questions are at least being asked on a C-suite level going, this is going to affect our company. We need to do something about it.
And I think to answer your question earlier, which I don't think we did, one of the challenges in understanding a customer requirement is that often that customer requirement is not well formed by the time it gets to the AV people delivering the solution. So we do, again, need to help. We need to educate the end user, but also not tie the end user up in incredibly complex security environments if that's not what they require.
Which end user? Like, from an AV point of view, we're talking to end users.
Yes.
Like the people that are actually up here presenting or doing something. They don't care what boxes in the rack or in the network. So
yeah,
we, I think, need to identify there are multiple end users, and the network team is an end user. The relationship between consultant and integrator is something that needs to be worked on. In large projects, you have that avenue. Where on a project I was on recently, there was a lot of collaboration between us. So we were kind of representing, we were the driving how the system was going to be deployed on the network. So we were the interface between the consultant and the client's IT. But that's rare. That's only because that was a large-scale stadium project that happened. But generally, there's not the budget, time, or resources to do it. And I think it's an education. And as you say, it's not if, it's when.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, as a manufacturer, the question was, how do you know what security features to put into your device? If you work in the Department of Defence in the US or Australia, it's very clear. You are told you will have this support. If you don't, you will not sell your product into defence. So I think that that sort of guides many manufacturers. If you want to get JITC certification, you must have this. That's very much a driver, I guess, for many manufacturers who are active in that space. Is we don't get a choice. ISO 2700 as an example is a mandatory requirement for JITC. FIPS 140-3 is a mandatory requirement for JITC. If you don't have that, you're not in the game. So some of that is driven from those very secure customers.
I think it's a good point there too. Like, there are manufacturers that don't have security, or AV manufacturers. Yeah. We don't have the expertise. Yeah. And where do you find that? I mean, we certainly take the lead from IT, take the lead from customers in very specific markets, but there's options. Biome kind of has done this route too of getting a consultant. Have somebody come in that is the expert and look at your devices and check your processes. And I mean, as an AV manufacturer group, we should be willing to do that to realize we may not have all the answers, and there are people and places and tools out there to help get those answers. So,
good comments. I mean, one thing that's really struck me is, apart from the blame that continues to be shifting between different, and no one's blamed the network yet, which is I thought quite a miss. But anyway,
we tried that; it didn't work.
Yeah, no, I don't need that one either. I mean, the other thing that's really become apparent to me is the gulf between IT security and AV. You've talked about attaining FIPS, certifications and some of those other things. Not to be rude, but IT security, that's kind of all behind us. We've been doing that for, lots of years. So, one thing that's really struck me is, clearly we need to be helping you, not only, have the right words and the right questions to actually be asking,
understand,
but actually understanding what those are. I mean, at the moment, you're talking about being reactive and reacting to being certified and those sorts of standards. Where we really not need to try and get to, at least in my opinion, from a cybersecurity viewpoint, is proactive. So really interested to understand, your thoughts around how can we improve the communication with IT security? How can we work better together? And what thoughts you had around, AV infrastructure being more proactive, on the network. And then you really want to open it up for some attendee questions after that.
I was actually talking with our CEO, was it earlier today, Clint, going, we talk about network readiness. What does that mean in AV? And really going, what we need to do is get one of your people to go help us design a network readiness
so it's now my
document. Yes, finally.
I knew we'd get there eventually. Excellent.
You're welcome. It took me a while to work this one in, but I've got it. So we hire a consultant from the IT industry who, you said, it's way behind us. We've done this for 10 years. Well, AV, we're trying to catch up. Let's not pretend we have the in-house expertise to understand all of your security needs on your network. Let's get somebody from that industry, explain to them, hey, here's what we're trying to achieve, and they can help us put together our network readiness documents. And my brother said whenever he worked on a job site, his first thing to do was to make friends with the IT nerds, because they would tell him what he needed and help him sort out his problems because they knew the answers and he had no idea. So I think that's what we need to do.
Kind of to that point, I would love to see more understanding from IT of what AV does a little bit, because I think that helps. To your point of I've gotten this questionnaire and it doesn't even relate to us, that there's something to that. It's almost, and don't take this the wrong way, but it's an almost I don't care attitude here. This is the thing you have to fill out and tell me that you've done it. Like, if there's someone understanding both ways, I think AV is willing to adapt and learn. And I think there's advantages to end users and everything, but putting AV components on the network, sometimes we just hit, there's not an openness to do that. And it's just a wall that you hit sometimes. And a little bit of understanding on both sides would go a long way, I think.
We've been going down that path for 10 years, like the jump from just control on network to where we are with AV over IP.
Yep.
Again, at RMIT, the solution design was a 150-page document, is what AVIP for that university would look like when it's deployed. And that's firewall rules, that's traffic flow, that's port configurations, that was everything. No one does that, not from an AV point of view. But what that gave me was I can talk, and what I try and tell other people is for the network deployment is you need to have the dialogue with the network people. You're not going to design the network, it's their network, they're going to design it, but you need to give them the information so they're informed on what they're designing and what the expectations are. And I think that transpires into cybersecurity. The gap, though, is we don't know what that is, and we need a certain amount of documentation from manufacturers. We need a certain amount of documentation from network people. We've got a VIXA here that have written a guideline. It's a good start, but it doesn't tell us the specifics and the questions to ask yet. And that's because I think a lot of them are unknown as well.
We all have roles, right? Every one of us every person or industry or persona is represented here all has a role in this. And
Correct. Yeah, it's a joint. That's what I'm trying to explain. It is all of us involved. It's they talk about defense in depth. Here's the depth. Yeah, from manufacturer to consultant to installer to end user or whatever your role is.
So talking about end users, let's see if there's any questions in the audience.
I'll just run that mic down.
Yeah.
There you go. Cheers.
Did you see this one?
I'm here to heckle Steve. No. All of your talk has been around manufacturing and technology and network security. There's been no discussion at all about the people aspect of it. How do you mitigate the risk of, bad actors within the industry, right? So you've got a control system like Harman bringing out the Muse platform, extremely powerful piece of compute, as you said, running probably a Linux operating system or something like that, that anyone who's a decent software developer could write any code to run on it. How do you mitigate the risk of people creating backdoors or other malicious things, from a people side of security rather than the technology side of security?
Look, I think technology can help in that as a manufacturer, you need to secure your underlying OS and that level of the product needs to be highly secure and impenetrable. And again, this is part of the testing that you go through within defense certifications. That next level up is the user code, if you like. Historically has been this black art created by people with long hair in back rooms. We're now moving. Yeah, see, I left this you in a younger day. We're now moving away from these proprietary languages and proprietary tools. So we are now in a world where the actual security team can audit the code running on one of our pieces of hardware. And you and I have worked on a project together where that was the case. So I think that is definitely a future, is going to become more and more a future state where not only am I auditing that your piece of hardware is secure, but I'm actually going to audit the Python code or whatever is running on your code to make sure there is no malicious backdoor. And as we move into this much more standards-based world for programming within the AV environments, that becomes possible, which it's never been before.
I think the other part of that too is while it may be frightening to you that you're starting to move towards using OSs that are a lot more open and widely used. I guess from my viewpoint, the advantage there is that we're also used to securing them and monitoring them. So that is pros and cons there. Question.
Yeah, I'm from Notre Dame University, and earlier this year I was in a situation where we were putting in a new system where we were starting to use the Crestron Air Media device on our network, and it was the situation where Crestron had the documentation of their security and network requirements, protocols and white papers and stuff. And I was trying to go through this with our cyber network teams, and I didn't understand it from a AV side. Like I knew what I was trying to accomplish, but I didn't understand the white papers, and my networks team and my cybersecurity team had no idea what like AirPlay or Miracast were or anything like that. So how do we, I suppose the thing is, how do I best upskill myself in the cyber side of things without just literally going back and doing an IT degree or something like that? And then also, how do we educate the more IT members of our teams or our staff or whatever in those AV systems?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I spent the last couple of weeks reading through some of those documents from different manufacturers as well, and they're written at two levels. They're written at like play school level and PhD level, and not a lot in between. And unless you play in it, when I first got buried into IT, got killed by acronyms. Yeah, people would be talking in meetings, like I'd be Googling and someone said, geez, you're taking a lot of notes. I said, I'm not taking notes, I'm Googling what all the acronyms are so I can keep up with the conversation. First part of your question comes down to education. There's a lot of training options out there. There's Sturt University, got IT Masters, I think they call it. They run a lot of 4-week courses. Brilliant. I did a penetration testing course with them, done some cybersecurity training with them, some other bits and pieces, and they give you a really good insight. The penetration testing was full on, like actually a full scale hunt the flag attack, five flags to pass the exam. And they actually take you there some really good structure. So you can teach yourself this stuff, but you've got to do it. Reading the manufacturer's documents, you've unfortunately hit the bottleneck that they're written for a particular audience, and it's not us. And I think that's where the manufacturers need to fill that gap. And organisations like Avixa, it's everyone. And the AV side, teaching AV is not rocket science. There's nothing we do that's really complicated, but IT for some reason don't get it. So I think we need to have a component that educates them as well. So it makes the conversation between the AV and the IT professional a little bit more fluid.
I think Dean's a great example. I mean, when I first met you, you were a lighting trog. You knew nothing about
Ponytail, offensive T-shirt and camo shorts.
Absolutely. And now you're one of the leading experts on networked AV and securing and delivering those sorts of solutions. And you didn't go back to do a 3-year degree to answer your question. It was short courses based on your experience, and I think that's another great example. The reality is, to your point, the IT world has learned all this stuff to the point where it's second nature, but they learn it from Udemy courses and from manufacturer courses and from all the trillions of hours of training that are out there on the interwebs. So that information is out there. What we can probably do a better job of is guiding people towards that information. Yep. And I think that's something that Avixa can help with, something manufacturers can help with. But importantly, you shouldn't be relying on AV manufacturers for security training, because frankly, there is trillions of hours out there that you can and should be leveraging.
Most of it's free. Just like to quickly finish with some final comments. So your final thoughts on the subject. Zach, can we start with you and then work back this way?
Use your microphone. Sorry, they took it away from me. Is it on?
Don't take it personally that they took your microphone.
No, it's all good. I mean, honestly, I think the realization up here that we all have to work together in this is really kind of the key takeaway, I think, that I've taken from this that everybody has a role and responsibility here, from all the people on the stage and to the users. So it's a challenging thing. It's a new thing for the industry, and certainly one that BIAM's going to be taking seriously moving forward too.
Thanks, Zach. Steve?
Yeah, I think conversations like this help bridge the gap between what IT already know and what AV don't yet know, and trying to, so doing this sort of thing helps quite a lot. But just being aware of it, if I'm aware that there's security settings I can put on a device and should do it, and I teach my people that that's what they're supposed to do, then being aware of it will bring us 10 steps closer than we are now.
And hopefully we don't break too much of your functionality when you put those controls on.
That's critical.
Oshana?
Cybersecurity is a complex topic, and it involves many components. So for someone to implement something in one area, you have to know multiple areas. For example, you need to understand how switch works, how radius server works. So this results in people being very high level and vague about how to implement something. So I think it's up to us manufacturers to work together with the network manufacturers to actually bring some training material and guidance on how to implement cybersecurity secure networks.
Graham?
I think some of us take this for granted. I mean, if you've been working, and I'm sorry to keep harping on about defence, but I think if you've been working in defence for a long time, this is just second nature.
It's a great use case.
It's not, you don't even think about it. But we then don't do a great job of sharing some of that with the industry more broadly. And I think an example of a military deployment guide actually says, here is how you configure this system to be secure, and this is what it will then be resistant to, as an example. The other thing I'll quickly touch on is the title of this is all about guarding the pixels. We haven't even talked about the fact that the actual content on the network, more and more, is actually the secure information that is very important.
Unsecured.
And is currently very much unsecured. So, so that becomes a whole different concept and a whole different conversation probably for next year. But that is what's coming very, very quickly when we start talking about putting content on networks. Yes, the network may be secure, or sorry, the requirements for the network may be secure, but the opportunity for someone to get onto that network and steal the intellectual property of a company by listening to a meeting, watching a video, some of that sort of stuff becomes, we become much more critical to our actual customer.
It's data at rest as well as data in motion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dean, you want to bring us home?
Definitely. I'm just going to quote an ex-chief architect for an organisation I worked for that I was part of, used to quote Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defence, and he used to talk about the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. So the known unknowns, they're the things we know we need to address. We know about them. We can deal with it. It's the unknown unknowns, the ones that are going to catch us out. And that goes back to Scott from Notre Dame, is talking about where to find the learnings. And we need to get that awareness and that understanding so we can ask the right question and be aware that that's a problem or that's a huge vulnerability or whatever. And if you get into vulnerability testing, all the rest of it, you can disappear down a rabbit hole and people spend that. That's all they do. They just up boffins in that area. We're never going to be to that extent unless you want to go down that as a career path. But we just need to broaden our horizons, our understanding, so we know what potentially can be a vulnerability for us.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, panel members, thank you very much. Very interesting conversation today, and I hope it was useful.
Thanks, Brad.
Yes, thank you, Bradley, as well. It's a great chat about all of that stuff. Terrific.